Are you what we call a recovering people pleaser? Have you recognized your people pleasing patterns and you've stopped some of those behaviors and now you're seeing a shift in your relationships? Or maybe some of your relationships have ended completely. And does this find you in what we'll call a winter season of relating to others? If so, today's Boldly Driven Conversations with Bree is for you. Welcome. So it is super cold here in Tennessee. We've been off school all week because of the cold, and we had a snowstorm and whatnot. So I've not been to school all week and haven't had a chance to do a Boldly Driven conversation with Bree. So I'm doing one now. It's Friday morning. I'm up early and out there. I'm going to go thrifting today. I'm doing something for me. I'm excited. But anyway, let's get to that winter season. We're in this winter season, right? It's cold, it's dark. We've made all these changes that we know are good for future us, but all of our relationships have changed, right? So what do we do? How do we deal with that? And is it really worth it? It is. So I think the first thing is that we have to, when we've noticed the shift in all of our relationships, when we've noticed that things have all changed, either relationships have ended or relationships are strained. And this is all kinds of relationships. This could be our professional relationships. It could be intimate relationships. It could be friend relationships. It could even just be like neighborly relationships. All of these different familial relationships, all of these different kind of relationships are going to be affected when we start standing up for ourselves, prioritizing ourselves, and not people pleasing or doing things for external approval. So there's going to be a change. So the first thing we have to do is to help us through this winter season of all these changes is to understand the shift itself, right? Like we see it, we're aware of it, but do we understand the shift? Do we understand why it's happening? So the first question we ask is why did it change? Why did this particular relationship change when I stopped people pleasing? And I think the first answer, the easiest answer is people pleasing sets a certain dynamic in our relationships. When we are a people pleaser, when we are someone who looks for external validation from others and we do things to prioritize everybody else, there is an imbalance that is created in the dynamic where the people pleaser is the one who's giving, and not necessarily receiving what they need in order for the relationship to thrive. And when that shifts and when we make that change, it's going to imbalance the relationship the other way. And really it's making it more equal, more balanced in general. Because what we start doing as people pleasers and we stop giving everything that we were giving before, and we're probably going to, for a while, receive the same that we received, which in some cases is nothing. So no change there, right? Except for from us. We're the ones who created the change. And so oftentimes people will, because the dynamic has been disrupted by us stopping prioritizing them, other people, groups, organizations, whatever it is, this leads to distance. It also can lead to dysfunction, which really the dynamic before was very dysfunctional, but now it's being recognized by the other party as this is a dysfunctional relationship because they have changed. And the change is seen as a negative because, well, you're not as caring, you're not as kind, you're not as this, that, and the other thing. And that's usually not true. You're just as caring, you're just as kind, but you're prioritizing yourself and your needs so that means you have less time to do their needs and their desires and all their wants for whatever kind of relationship that is. And so this just leads to distance. It can, because there might be miscommunication. Maybe they feel like you're angry with them. Maybe they feel like they've done something. Sometimes it's because the other party realizes, oh, I've been using this person and now I feel shame and guilt and sorrow, and I don't know how to talk about it with them. So I'm going to pull back. People don't like to be faced with when they've done something wrong, or, so if that happens, then there just is distance is created because the dynamic of the relationship has changed. And oftentimes distance, it just naturally is going to be created. So we can understand why it's happening then. The second thing that we do after we can understand why the distance is happening in our relationships, is then value the authentic connections that we do still have. I have gone through this where, my entire community has changed, and people who I thought were part of my support system in the last year, 2 years actually, maybe even a little longer, are no longer a part of my life, like at all. And it's wild. It's absolutely wild to me because we were so connected and we lived life together. We did life together. And I sit back now with a different perspective and I realize I was doing life. I was reaching out. I was doing all the things. They were just receiving me. And so now they have nothing to receive from me because I've pulled back, because I'm not going to do things for other people when I need to prioritize myself during the season of my life. And they've not reached out. So that dynamic, those connections have been severed, for lack of a better word. But there are those that have remained. And those connections, those are the genuine connections. Those are the ones where they have authentically and intentionally reached out. They are the ones who have show value of our relationship, that there was always value there. And very far and few between. If you've gone through this, it's so surprising, especially if you were in like a deeply focused, shared life community together. It's just wild how this happens. And those remaining relationships, what happens with them is they become deeper. They become even more genuine and authentic, because now we're not people pleasing in those. There is forgiveness there. There's an exchange of, hey, I see you. There's an exchange of mutual respect, true mutual respect, and an allowance of change and growth and evolving. Those relationships are the most genuine connections you will have, and they grow so deeply. So then, but it still hurts. And we tend to find ourselves navigating this winter season of feeling desolate and cold and removed. And because we've decided to make that change of we're not going to people please, right? And so we hurt. We're wounded during that season. And it's completely legitimate. Those feelings are so very valid, but we can't just sit in those feelings and live from them, right? So what do? How do we navigate this time that we find ourselves in this winter season of, broken relationships and for whatever reason? So navigating this winter, the first thing is acknowledging those feelings. Have you acknowledged the feelings of feeling lost and feeling betrayed and feeling like, wow, that relationship wasn't deep. That relationship wasn't real. It was at least not the way we perceived as it being real, of the deepness and the connection that it was. We have to grieve the loss of what we thought was, and grieve the loss of community, grieve the loss of having something we thought we had that we don't have any longer. And so we have to work through those feelings, right? We have to acknowledge them. And it's important to validate those feelings with someone else, and talk to someone about that and process through those feelings. And that is called the inner work. And it's something I absolutely love in my coaching business. We do the inner work in order to do the outer work. So we always start with the inner work first. And so that involves us becoming more aware and acknowledging those feelings. The second thing is we have to self-reflect. I think this is probably both sides of the coin, same side of the same coin, both sides of the same coin. I can't remember the phrase, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it's both great and super painful when we start self-reflecting, because when we start to self-reflect, what happens is we start to recognize and understand our own needs. We start to understand our own values. We start to understand the boundaries that we absolutely need. And everybody needs boundaries in every relationship. Boundaries are not bad. Boundaries are good. They're put there for others' safety and our safety. And so we start understanding these things about ourselves. What we also start happening when we start self-reflecting is we start seeing our own patterns and where we messed up. where we were wrong, where we need healing, where we are not perfect. And that's okay. But we have to forgive ourselves through that. Again, it's doing this inner work in order to do the outer work. And when we start reflecting, we also can start answering the question of what drives us in our relationships, in all different relationships. What is the driver? The driver used to be receiving love from others. That's why we people please. Love, acceptance, being seen, being known. That's why we people pleased. So now that we're not doing that, what is driving us in each of our relationships? And we have to reflect on that. And what kind of relationships do we want in the future? You know, now that we've established we're not going to people please and do things for external validation, and that's what we did in so many of our relationships, if not all of them, what are the tenets of having a good, deep, genuine relationship moving forward? Right? So we have to ask ourselves those questions and reflect on that of what we truly want and need. And the third thing that is really important for us when we're going through this winter season is self-care. We talk about self-care all the time, but when I say self-care, I'm not just talking about getting your nails done or going to a spa day or taking a hot bath. All those things are wonderful, and we should do those things for ourselves. You know, it's okay to do those things. They're good things. Nothing wrong with them. But when I'm talking about self-care, I'm talking about doing this inner work, understanding ourselves, loving ourselves where we're at, all parts of ourselves, even the parts that we feel are weaknesses or not good, you know, or things that we'd like to change about ourselves. So we have to self-love. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to learn how to love ourselves and accept ourselves just as we are, so that we can embrace our future, which is the next part of working through this winter season that we might find ourselves in. So we embrace our future. And we do that by focusing on the positive things and having gratitude for what's going on, what abundance is in our life right now. Even though we may have lost community, friends, connections, all of those things. All those things are beautiful things we need. We each need connection. We each need community. We need one another. So we focus on the community we do have. We focus on the friendships and the relationships we do have right now that are healthy and strong and serving us. And we're serving them, and they're mutually respected and genuine and authentic and real and growing deeper. Where can we find the gratitude? Where can we find that positivity, so that it builds momentum in our life in other areas where maybe it doesn't feel so positive. Maybe it doesn't feel wonderful. It doesn't feel like we're growing. So we take that gratitude, and the winter time is not a death. Yes, relationships have ended. That doesn't mean it's a death to those relationships. If we really want those relationships to revive, then we can do things. We can extend the hand of grace to others. We can show compassion. And in some places that is absolutely wonderful and great. But there's that boundary there. If that boundary is being crossed or it's not being reciprocated, that's when we have to let it go. And winter is not a death. It's a time of deep growth. It's a time of rest. It's a time of decomposition that fertilizes the land and fertilizes us, of deep healing, evolving, growth, change into something beautiful. Spring comes after every winter. And the harsher the winter, the more beautiful the spring. So if we can look at things from that perspective and shift and reframe this winter time that we are living, physically this cold, this winter, but then also this winter season in our relationships and community and change that we're going through. And we can see it as it is purposeful for my future spring, that it is coming. Spring is coming. So while we're going through this winter and going into spring is just a few weeks away here, we rebuild and we build relationships. We're rebuilding relationships that we want to heal, that we want to have a reconnection with, that are healthy for both of us, both parties. And you get to rebuild those relationships that you want to rebuild, creating boundaries and value systems and belief systems that are sustainable, that are not just going to happen for a short time and then fall apart because the other person is not as invested, or the organization is not as invested in your growth and health and healing, right? And evolving. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes some of those relationships just are for a season and we have to let go. We have to let go of that connection. But for the ones that we want to rebuild, we can do that. And more importantly, there are new relationships that we get to build. So when we are creating new relationships, new opportunities with new community, and this is what I'm finding that's just wonderful, is you just open yourself up to so many new experiences. And something that I'm also really excited about that have happened is relationships that went to the wayside for me just because of like logistics or things that happened years ago where there was misunderstandings or miscommunication, or, just they weren't a priority. I wasn't a priority. Our relationship was not a priority. And those have been a couple of those I'm starting to revive. I'm reaching out and I'm starting to revive some of those relationships. And I've had a couple of people reach out to me too, because they see a change in me and they're reaching out and they're like, wow, like you've changed a lot and I want to get to know this new part of you, this different side of you. And so it's a rebuilding of a relationship that I wasn't even like aware of, had ended. Or maybe you are aware of it and it's going to be revived. So it's both a building and a rebuilding. It's a really, really beautiful part of that winter season, leading you into spring, into the new spring abundance, right? And we get to do this now with boundaries and values that are good for us, that are healthy for us. We get to choose. And it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. It's very empowering, and it's coming. I promise you it's coming. Sometimes we have to step out and sometimes we need some help with that. And that's where like coaching is amazing, because we get to do that inner work so that we get to do that outer work and do that building and rebuilding with other people. And I think the biggest part of this phase is having patience with ourselves and others as we're building and rebuilding. Just having patience, because it takes time to build true, genuine, authentic relationships, right? It's not just going to happen overnight. But if it is important to us, not in a people-pleasing way, if it's important to us to have a certain connection, because that connection is valuable for whatever reason, as long as it's not people-pleasing or receiving approval, external approval, then it's something that we're going to invest in. We will invest in others and they are going to invest in us. But we have to have patience for it. We have to have patience. And during all of that is that self-care and that self-love and self-worth that we're building in ourselves and empowering ourselves with, that we don't have to have these relationships in order to feel fulfilled, in order to feel loved, in order to feel worthy and valuable, right? So if you find yourself in this winter season, I get it. I'm there too in certain places and ways as well. And it sucks. Winter sucks. It's cold, but it's purposeful and it can be beautiful in its own right. Okay, so I have a couple of bold questions for you today, challenge questions for you. If now that you have stopped people pleasing, right, and you find yourself in this winter season, you've probably faced, or maybe you haven't, and that's why this question might be really good, is what is some of the uncomfortable truths about both yourself and your relationships that have come to light, or maybe the ending of certain relationships? What has come to light? What are some of those uncomfortable truths about yourself and how you work in relationships, and those relationships themselves that are really uncomfortable but true, that you found now through the situation? And more importantly, the follow-up question to this is, what possibilities have those uncomfortable truths now opened for you? Like, what possibilities do you have for yourself now? Are you discovering that you didn't know, that you didn't have a possibility before? I know for me, that's been one of the biggest, most empowering things, is that by opening myself up, that by being truthful with myself, these uncomfortable things about myself and doing that inner work, I now have so many more possibilities for my life that I just really didn't think were possible. So ask yourself that. What are those uncomfortable truths about yourself and relationships? And more importantly, what possibilities have they opened up for you? And then the second question that I have for you is, what if you were designing your perfect relationship, because now you have this new opportunity with new relationships, right? Any kind of relationship, familial relationship that you have that you want to reignite, professional relationships, intimate relationships, friend relationships, neighborly relationships, all the different relationships. If you were to design the perfect, because there's no perfect relationships, perfect relationship, right? What would it look like? How would you feel about it, right? What would it look like and how would it feel? What would that relationship look like and how would it feel? And what are the non-negotiables that now have to be a part of that relationship that maybe weren't a part of your relationships before because of the people-pleasing dynamic that you brought to the table? All right, so happy Friday. Stay warm. Spring is coming. Have a great week.